Here we have a Windows 2008 server computer with the DNS and DHCP roles installed. We will, on this machine, install the Men&Mice server components. This machine is a 64-bit machine, as we can see here in the system properties. Therefore, we must install on this machine the 64 versions of the DHCP server controller and DNS server controller. But first, we will install the Men&Mice Central, which contains the database which will hold all the user authentication and, in addition, the metadata fields that we will store along with the other data. So here we have the installer packages for the Men&Mice server components. The first bit we install is the Men&Mice Central. We double click on the MSI installer, accept the license agreement, here we install for all users on this computer. We just confirm the default location of the Men&Mice Central, which is Program Files Men&Mice Central. The Men&Mice Central is a 32-bit application and can also run on a 64-bit machine. We only need to take care of special 64-bit versions for the DNS or DHCP server controllers. The installation is usually quite fast, and here now the Men&Mice Central is already installed. We can verify this by opening the Services panel and look for the Men&Mice Central system being installed. Now that we have the Men&Mice Central installed, we need the management console to log into the system and enter the license keys. For this, we will go to a Windows 7 workstation machine to install the Men&Mice management console there. Now we are on a Windows 7 machine, a workstation machine, where we will install the Men&Mice management console, which is the main graphical interface into the Men&Mice system. Before we do the installation, we check that we have proper IP version 6 connectivity here. For that, I open the command line window and check with ipconfig that we have IP version 6 addresses. And we see here that we have both global IP version 6 addresses and unique local IP version 6 addresses here. And in addition, we also have IP version 4. So this is a dual home machine. We also make sure that we can reach our server, the Windows 2008 server that we have installed the Men&Mice Central on. For this time, I just check with a simple ping. And we see that machine resolves, or that name, Win2K version 6 home strutman.de, results in an IP version 6 address that can be reached. So everything looks fine for the installation. For the installation, I double click on the Men&Mice console installation package, agree to the license. We install in Program Files Men&Mice Management Console. We do a complete installation which will install the main binary, which is 1.exe, and a PDF handbook. So now the product is installed, and we will find it in the Start menu. Men&Mice. There's the Men&Mice Management Console. So the server we want to connect is our Windows 2008 server where we have installed the Men&Mice Central. In the initial installation, the username and password is both administrator. So when we first log in, we get the first use wizard, which will guide us through the initial configuration of the system. So first we have to give a new password. Then we add the license keys. We have 3 license keys, one for each module. The first one is for the DNS module. Second one is for the IP address management module. And the last one is for DHCP. We currently don't have any DNS and DHCP servers with agent installed in the network, so we cannot add any DNS or DHCP servers at that stage. We will do that later. So that finishes the installation wizard. And we see the main interface of the management console, where we have the object that we can manage on the left panel here, and we would see all the objects that are able or available for managing. We would see that on the right side. Currently, because we don't have any DNS or DHCP servers added to the system, we don't see any DNS or DHCP servers here. Well, what we can already do is we can define our IP version 6 and IP version 4 ranges that we have in the network. So here by default we have the 0/0 IP version 6 range, which is the whole IP version 6 address range, and we have the 0/0 IP version 4. I start with IP version 6. So here we enter the IP version 6 address of the unique local IP address space. The command I just entered will be ending up in the history trail that logs every change to the system. So every user name that makes any change, date, and what have been changed in the system. So we're saving that back. We now see the /48. Of course, from the /48 we currently use only a /64. So I'm creating a new /64 from here. And we see that the system built a hierarchy, a tree of IP ranges. So the /64 is below the 48. We also have a global IPv6 address space that I will enter now. And that again is the /48. So here I made a typo. I did not fully write the IPv6 address, so the system now suggests that I use the subnet ::0/48 instead of just : :. That's fine with me. And also from this global IP address space, we only use a /64. So below that, I create a new 64. Currently, if we open this address space, it's empty. It says 0 addresses in use, because we have currently no DNS or DHCP servers in the system, and we don't have any statically defined IP addresses in the system. So next, in order to populate a little bit of our IP address ranges, we will add the DNS and DHCP servers to the system. For that, we go back to our Windows 2008 server. So now we are back on our Windows 2008 server, and we already have the DNS and DHCP server role installed on this machine. You can check this. Go to the roles. And we see here both we have DNS and DHCP server installed. In order to be able to manage these DNS and DHCP server, we install the so-called Men&Mice DNS server controller and Men&Mice DHCP server controller. These are small agents that sit on the local server machine and talk to the DNS and DHCP server. Because this server is a 64-bit machine, we install the 64-bit versions of the server controllers. First, I will install the DHCP server controller. Server controller is installed in program files Men&Mice DHCP server controller. That is done. Then I install the DNS server controller. That is installed in program files Men&Mice DNS server controller. So now we have both server controllers installed. We take a look in the services panel. And see here the server controller is started, the DHCP server controller is started, and the DNS server controller is started. So now we can go back to the workstation, to the management console, and add this DNS and DHCP server to the system. So we are back on the workstation with the Men&Mice management console, and now we first add the DNS server. We go here to DNS servers. We currently don't have any DNS servers connected. Click on the plus, and then we give the resolvable name of our Windows 2008 DNS server where we have installed the server controller. If we don't have any DNS servers currently running, we can also type in the IPv6 or IPv4 server address of that machine here. Because we have tested already with ping that this name is resolvable to an IPv6 address, we just keep it with a server name. So now we see that server is connected here. And if we click on the server name, we see we already have some zones in here. We have two forward zones, home.de and test.example. We have a reverse zone for the 192.168.1.0/24 network, and we have another reverse zone for the IPv6, the global IPv6 address space that we have. If we double click on a zone name, the system reaches out to the DNS server and loads in real time the current data from the zone. So here we see all the DNS data. We see IPv6 addresses and we see IPv4 addresses in the system. We can manage directly the DNS data from here. For example, if I open this zone, go here, and I want to add another record here. And this is a record for the unique local IP address space. Of course, in real networks, most of the time, the machines will just register itself with dynamic updates. And every dynamic update we will also see here in the Men&Mice management console. So we save this new change. And this change is directly saved back to the DNS server. The DNS server is reloaded and that new address is now live in the network. If we now go back to our IP address ranges and open the global IP address space, we see that all the global IP addresses are automatically imported into this range. And we see the address and we see the DNS names of the servers on machines. We also see that there can be more than one host name or DNS name for an IP address. So we see here this machine has the name CSOS2 and ns2 test.example. And this machine here has even more IP addresses. If we open this machine, we see the DNS data attached to it. So we see that the machine with this IP address here has a quad A record. Attached to that quad A record is a CNAME record with a different name and an A record. and it has, in addition, 2 more quad A records for different names and the same IP version 6 address. So that gives us a good overview on the namespace in DNS and the IP addresses that are in use. It's the same if we now look in our unique local IP address space. We see that one IP address that I just added. If I open this one, we see it's just one quad A record assigned to that IP address. So we have also seen that we have IP version 4 IP addresses in the DNS. So let's create some IP version 4 IP ranges in here. And we have the local IP address space 192.168.1.0/24, which is the local private IP address space, IP version 4. And that is a normal subnet here. So a network address and broadcast address are automatically reserved by the system so that they cannot given out for host names. So that new range is created, and if I open it, I see all the IP addresses in there, and I see the DNS names if IP addresses have DNS names in the system. Also, sometimes it's just nice to see whether certain machines are really online currently in the system. So what we can do is we can select the IP address space and send a ping to all the machines. This will take a little while. Now the Men&Mice Central will send ping ICMP requests to all the machines, to all the IP addresses. And now we see with green and red dots which machines are currently online. And with the red dots we see all the machines that are currently offline. Something similar is possible in IP version 6. If we open an IP version 6 range, we can select all the addresses and we can ping the machines. And we see some of them are online and some are not. So now we have the DNS servers in place. Next step would be to add a DHCP server. For that we go to the DHCP servers, and we currently don't have any DHCP server in the system. We again put in the server name. And then we select the kind of DHCP server that we want to add. In this case, we have a Microsoft with an agent installed. The agent is the Men&Mice DNS server controller. Other options are an agent-free installation without a server controller installed, or in Unix, IC DHCP server, which can run on Linux or Solaris. And we can also support this DHCP server on Cisco iOS-based devices. But for here, we use the Microsoft with agent installed. So now the DHCP server is added, and we see already we have 2 scopes in there, which are IP version 4 scopes. We can create a new scope for our local IP version 4 address space. Lease time is 8 days by default, so we change that because it's quite long. Want to have it 1 day in this network. We don't have any super scope here, so we keep the default. And here we already see the IP version for address space with the IP addresses, and we currently don't have assigned any pool. So we need to find some free space here with currently no DNS names assigned, and we create an address pool in here starting from 87, or we start from 90 to 110, so roughly 20 addresses in here. And here we have the created pool that can be used to give out dynamic IP addresses. Also can create reservations for static DNS, for static DHCP. And for that we would need a MAC address. I'm just typing in a dummy MAC address here just for testing purposes. The system automatically matches the lease name, called mail server here, against a DNS entry for this IP address. And if it does not match, or if there's no DNS entry, we see this little warning sign here. Of course, we don't have this entry currently in DNS, so we get this warning sign. Here in the overview, we see a graphical overview over our scope. The gray areas is unassigned space. The blue one is the pool, and the green line is the one reservation that we have. So now our new scope is added to the DHCP server. On scope and also on static IP ranges, we can define a discovery schedule. And the discovery schedule will, in interval, send ping ICMP requests to any IP address defined in a range or in a scope. And we do that here for this network starting today on 9:40, and wait a little bit until the ping discovery happens. While we wait, I show you that we can also from here define all the DHCP options on the scope. So for example, we can here change the DNS entries. All the DNS servers. We can use the quick filter to get any information regarding DNS. And these new scope options are directly saved back to the DHCP server. So now let's take a look if the discovery already happened. Nope. Now let's take a look if the discovery has finished. And we see now in the overview a new column called last seen. We can move around the columns and now we see here that this machine has been last online at this point of time. And that gives us a nice overview when a certain machine has been last seen live in the network. So that finishes our small tour through the Men&Mice console and the Men&Mice system. There's much more to explore in the Men&Mice system, such like the quick filter, which work in almost all windows, or the ability to set fine-grained access controls on almost all objects, that is IP addresses, IP ranges, DNS zones, DNS servers, DHCP servers and DHCP scopes, with fine-grained access control and delegation in users and groups. Also, there's a very powerful way for scripting with Java.NET and SOAP interfaces. The ability to find custom fields for metadata being stored with the objects. And hooks out of the system. That can be any scripting language like Python, Ruby, PowerShell, or any other scripting language that are called whenever any of the object changes. And that can be used to update external data sources like inventory databases or network equipment like routers or any other network equipment. Also, all changes in the system are stored in the object history. So here I'm looking for all changes made by the user administrator. And we see here all the changes that I have done during that demo. Thank you for listening and have fun with the Men&Mice system.